intersection of sustainability and entrepreneurship on a very micro scale. Today, let's deep dive further to get an insight into corporate sustainability and the industry trends in the economy as a whole. Who better to speak on this topic than our very eminent speaker for this evening, Mr. Shailesh Tyagi, who's a partner at EY India at the Climate Change and Sustainability Services Division. A master's graduate in environmental management and engineering from UNSW and a sustainability energy program graduate from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Mr. Tyagi has been working in the field with renowned companies in India and abroad. He has also founded Riddhi Global, which is a climate change consultancy firm. Mr. Tyagi comes with an experience of over a decade in the field of ESG, sustainability, and climate change. Now, I'm very certain that all of us can't wait to get on this hour-long journey with our speaker. But before we start, there are a few instructions that need to be kept in mind to maintain the decorum of the session. Participants are requested to keep their microphones muted throughout the session unless they are instructed to do so otherwise. There would be a Slido link in the chat box via which all the participants will be able to ask questions throughout the speaker, to the speaker, and these questions will be taken up at the end of the talk. In case of any technical queries, feel free to drop in a personal message in the Zoom chat. Lastly, please maintain discipline throughout the workshop to ensure an enriching experience for all of us. Without further ado, I hand the stage over to Mr. Tyagi so we can start with your talk.
Thanks, Anvi. Thank you. And thanks for the introduction. And look, I'm so happy to take this session for you guys. I honestly, gone are the days of millennials when it comes to sustainability or ESG. Now, honestly, when I talk to Najid in my team, who has more than 12, 13 years of experience, even when I talk to him, I really get excited when I understand his vision, on sustainability and climate change. And then Najid reminds me that when you started your career, around that I was entering school, right? But and I learn every day. I learn from him. What I'm trying to say, sustainability is not something which is you have read about it, you have done bachelor's, master's, or PhDs. It's such a vast area. Number one, it covers numerous sectors, numerous issues. I would say diverse sectors, numerous issues. It covers it depending on where your business is. It depends upon local requirements, your geography, sustainability maturity of the company. So look, sustainability, the way I learned it, defined by someone I look up to personally, John Elkington. John Elkington came up with the concept of triple bottom line, right? And triple bottom line, the whole sustainability started. We can go to the next slide, Najib. Thanks, mate. If you start looking at sustainability, John Elkington defined sustainability at that time from the lens of intergenerational equity, socio-economic environment, the triple bottom line. So basically, how you really manage the social dimension, of course, the economic dimension, the financial sustainability, and how you really look into the environmental dimension, the socio-economic environment, the triple bottom line. And the Brundtland Commission, I won't bore you how it started and all, everything is available for you to read. But what I would like to cover, as on today, what are the discussions which are happening in the boardrooms? I would like to cover how a discussion in the boardroom of one of the largest, say, Indian conglomerate aligns to the global requirements, global expectations, say, from the UN, from, you can say, people who are driving the agenda, right? And they're various. They are stakeholders, they are shareholders. We have stakeholder activism, so much happening in energy and resources. Boards are being replaced, the CEOs are resigning or forced to resign in some cases. We know the other drive is coming from the regulatory side, where in India, as an example, it will be mandatory for top 1,000 companies to report on their sustainability, right? And then, of course, the push from investors, right? So how it all aligns. But if you look at this slide, there are various challenges that are confronted by the world today. We all know what's happening to the planetary health, right? We all know what's happening in terms of the societal. Every time, you understand the inequity, you understand what's really happening in terms of the social impact, right? What's really happening in terms of social capital, and the externalities around that. And then, of course, the governance, the decision making, the resilient growth model. But the way I would like you to understand ESG or sustainability. On one hand, sustainability is defined as social, economic, environment, that triple bottom line. Some people had issues with economic, and rightly so, because at that time their thinking was sustainability is great, but the moment you put focus on economic, the financial capital is well understood. The regulation is pretty strong. We have standards. Annual report comes in every year. We have strong corporate governance around it. But where we are lacking is around environment and social, right? So why we are not covering that? And why we are not talking about decision making around those ENS aspects, environment and social. And that's where the whole ESG concept came, right? And it came from the lens of, let's keep moving, Najib, thanks. Then I would like you to think about environment, social, and governance. Look, because for this is not a sector discussion, this is not a company discussion. For you, okay, let's think about today's example. We have COVID-19 pandemic. We know people are working from home. They have started thinking about the interconnections between people, planet, and profit, right? Najib, we can go to the next slide, please. And then they are looking at how it links to life, livelihood, health, poverty, equity, climate change, and of course, that all links to the stability of financial systems. So a lot of debate is happening. People have started thinking, in this environment. The World Environment Day, which happened on June 5th, the theme was reimagine, recreate, restore, right? And it was launched by the UN as the UN Decade for Ecosystem Restoration. And the emphasis is more around the need for all stakeholders to reset their relationship with nature, right? So that's the theme. Now, in the past, the onus was on the government and development agencies. But now it's on businesses and individuals. So you can see the shift. It has become mainstream. ESG is mainstream now. The reason that you guys are interested in it, and I've taken time out of my business conversation here, because even somewhere I also know the future of this holds with you guys, right? Tomorrow as leaders, tomorrow as individuals in the society, because ESG is mainstream, and it's what we do today impacts the future. We talk about intergenerational equity, right? The needs of the future and the needs of the present, how you really balance it, Now, it's more around the other thing. If you see, there's a strong sustainability implementation happening. If you talk to people like Najid who are on the call, or Silu in my team, they would say all our conversations are not just around helping companies with their narrative. It's not around their strategy or short, medium, long-term targets. It's around identifying key aspects that helps them make their business ecosystem better. Just bring in resilience for the future. That's the kind of work we are doing, right? Now, the other side. If you look at this particular slide talks about climate change. There are various aspects around ESG. Under environment, we have climate change. And why we covered climate change on this slide, I really want you to understand the concept of climate change, because a lot of people confuse climate change with pollution. Some other people confuse climate change, greenhouse gases, with, you would say, weather events. Yes, there's a linkage, but the way I would like you to understand climate change is this. Every company needs to understand what are their greenhouse gas emissions. They need to understand what are their energy consumption, what are their energy production. Once they understand, they can come up with an inventory. There are standards in place which can help the company come up with their inventory. Like we have inventory, right, any inventory. Think about in the same way around greenhouse gas emissions. Then you would say, what are those greenhouse gas emissions? There are 6 gases in greenhouse gas emissions, not to be confused with SOx, NOx pollution, right? They are not greenhouse gases. And when we talk about greenhouse gases, the immediate thing comes out carbon dioxide. Now, when you talk about carbon dioxide, I call it the best way to explain greenhouse gas impact or global warming or climate change is enhanced greenhouse gas effect, right? It's not greenhouse gas effect isn't bad. What's happening is enhanced greenhouse gas effect, right? Global warming is happening. The world is trying to limit the global warming to less than 1.5 degrees, right? And how you really look at the impact of our greenhouse gas emissions, what's causing that? The vehicle, greenhouse gas emission, carbon dioxide emissions, right? The agriculture. So, I always say, I give an example of methane, classic. I worked in New Zealand for a few years, and I was helping agriculture sector company, and coming from strong mining and metals, oil and gas and power or financial services background, they started talking to me about burps and farts, right? And I was like, how? Where is the discussion going? And they were like, look, Shailesh, that's where our emissions are. Burps and farts of animals, right? So methane, and they are methane emissions. So it's such a diverse area. One day, our team is going to a thermal fired power plant and looking at the coal fired, looking at the proximate ultimate analysis of coal, the fuel characteristic, and understanding, okay, what is the coal amount, what's the humidity, right? And all that. We do an analysis of coal. And on the other hand, I talked about agriculture. We go to a coal mine, where the emissions are happening in coal mine. Think about, if you want to go underground in a coal mine, you need to ventilate it, right? Because you flush in air goes in, air goes out. It traps methane, high volume of air, less methane content. So that's methane emission. The other would be, the moment you try to mine, you drill holes to extract gas. I won't go too technical, but imagine you're extracting gas, which is high in methane. A common sense would say high methane, high calorific value. If I put straight to the atmosphere, what will happen? I tell you what will happen. Methane is 25. It keeps changing, 21, 23, 25. I stick to 25. It's 25 times more impactful in terms of enhancing greenhouse gas effect than as compared to carbon dioxide. That's methane for you, right? And when you start looking at methane from the other lens, the source of methane is a high calorific value. So what it means, let's net mining example. You take out the gas, you can on-site generate power. So you stop that flaring, the flare. What is flaring? You basically burn methane into CO2, you burn it, that's a flare. You see in oil and gas, refineries and all. So the point is, a lot of emission sources, right? So you need to understand what are those emission sources. You need to be confident that those emission sources, what you are capturing, reporting, you have your instruments are highly reliable, highly accurate. You understand there's a reporting requirement, there's a standard which you follow, so that what we do in India at a thermal fired power plant should be the same what we do back in Australia or what we do back in the US, right? Same concept. So standardized. The other things. What are the impacts, right? A lot of impacts, of greenhouse gas effects is proven. But I think the discussion should be more around what we can do, right? And what we can do with a proper understanding. So I give an example again. People tell me, why don't you move from X car to Y car, Tesla? And it's a classic. All my friends back home in Sydney are driving Teslas, if I tell you. And I always had my doubts. Of course, operationally and all that is fine, but the life cycle assessment. So we end up doing a lot of work around life cycle assessment of those batteries, right? How you look at it. So as long as you have the point I'm trying to make, anything you do in that space, a proper understanding is required, more of a life cycle approach, more of value chain approach. Just to explain that, imagine I have okay, again, the thermal fired power plant is classic, right? Coal, dirty coal, you're burning, but it's cheap, it's needed, right? So you have done a lot around windmills, renewables, you're exploring around hydrogen, you're doing a lot of work around EVs, in logistics, you're doing what you can, biofuels and all, right? But if you may be doing a lot, but if your upstream, you can say supplier or downstream customer is not doing, then it's not really helping, right? It's more around giving options to those customers to have various you can say various other options. And I would say understanding the landscape of climate change and the opportunities and risks. So message, climate change is real. Companies should understand what are their greenhouse gas emissions. They should report what's in their control, scope 1. They should report what is not in their control, like electricity you take from the grid, scope 2. And scope 3 would be, I take a cab and go and meet, always give this example, meet the company. The distance I've traveled is for that meeting, is business, that the greenhouse gas emission because of the travel should be reported under scope 3. So scope 1, 2, and 3, you don't have to worry about it. Just think they need to look at the emissions and they need to report. And they need to report with certain quality, with a clear audit trail. One can go and audit, right? And using a certain standard. Moving on. When it comes down to, Najid, if you can go to the next slide, please. Thanks. And then we also look at, Najid, can you please change the slide? Sorry. All right, I keep talking. Thanks, Najib. Okay, then it comes down to planetary boundaries, right? So in terms of when we start looking at understanding the planetary boundaries is important for you guys, right? And look, when we cover, when we give our presentation to the clients, we don't cover these aspects, but I thought I went back to my uni days and I thought, let me try to cover this slide, right? So look, we are already outside the safe operating space for at least 4 of the 9 boundaries, right? That's what it is. I mean, that's the message, when you start looking at climate change, biodiversity, land system change, biogeochemical flows, which is nitrogen and phosphorus imbalance, right? You know what's happening in agriculture and all that in the atmosphere. The message is we are already outside the safe operating space for out of 4 of the 9 boundaries. So it's not just about climate change, right? It's around biodiversity and other areas as I covered. Okay. 2021, there are 3 meetings which are happening, the very latest for you, which gives us a chance to avoid these planetary boundary overshoot, right? So for example, there's a convention on biological diversity meeting in Kunming, China, or Kunming. The UN Climate Summit, COP26 in Glasgow, a lot happening, a lot of noise around it happening in Glasgow. And COP26 is basically conference of parties, right? Conference of parties, countries come together, and it's the 26th, so COP26, and they cover what can be done around limiting global warming, what countries can do, what are their individual targets, and all that. So that's what it is. The famous was Paris Agreement. If you can Google, you will see the targets were given, and every country came up with their own targets and all that. And then we have UN Food Systems Summit in Rome. And I wanted to cover all this because mostly when we talk to our clients, honestly, it's around ESG, decarbonization, safety. We talk about COP26, what's coming. We talk about carbon border adjustment mechanism, what's happening in Europe, EU taxonomy. But these, if I have to really zero it down for anyone who wants to get to the bottom of this, called the concept of sustainability, is worth looking at these planetary boundaries. It's very important for you to understand what are the key areas and follow these 3. You can say the Rome, Glasgow, and Kunming summits. Moving on. In terms of, I would like to spend more time on slides, but on some slides spend more time than the other to explain you the concept. And any one of you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. Any question, text me. I'll find time, or someone in my team will help you. So moving on, global carbon budget. So I would like you to understand the concept of greenhouse gas emissions like a budget, right? I have 100 rupees at home. I'm allowed to only spend 60 rupees. I have to save 40 rupees. And if I don't save, it's imbalance, right? That's a simple concept. So it's as simple as that. We understand there's science behind it. We understand what are global emissions at the moment, right? What are the emissions? What are the sources, right? Okay. And we also understand what is the limit to it. Now, that's the whole global carbon budget concept, right? When we look at this slide, there are certain elements here, right? We are looking at greenhouse gas emission from fossil fuels. You are looking at from deforestation, land use, and all that, then you are looking at biosphere, right? The vegetation, soil, and all. Then you look at atmospheric carbon dioxide content. You also have to look at the sediments, the organic carbon, and all. And then, of course, then you go into the ocean where you look at marine biota and dissolve. It's getting very technical. So, but you don't have to worry about all this. Just think there is a global carbon budget. If we really want to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees, we need to understand how much I can emit, right? At the company level, at the country level, at regional level. And that's the way the whole science-based target initiatives and all come in, right? Companies have, the science will tell them, if you really apply this concept, with your current business, you can say growth, this is the trajectory, like waterfall diagram you're going to go, and that's where you're going to peak. And if you really want to limit, your graph will be different, and you need to have a robust emission management reduction plan after that, right? Energy efficiency, it can come down to value chain partnership, it can come down to new energy. A lot can be done. You can buy offsets at the end if you have realized you can't really practically reduce, or you can buy offsets. But that's another discussion around the greenwashing and all. So moving on, in terms of thanks, Najib, thanks for your help. When we start looking at what's the other thing we would like you to know, IPCC recently came up with something called IPCC capital A, capital R, and after that would be 6, AR6. What it is, it's an intergovernmental panel on climate change, 6th assessment report. Now, number 6 is the 6th report, fine. But if you look at the messages here, right, we have tried to sum it up for you. The IPCC report, I call it in fact, I've written a piece on it. Silu and her team are helping. Hopefully it will be in media very soon, and I would like you to read that. But there's lot information around something called the Code Red report. I call it climate emergency, right? The report is very, very clear that it's the whole human influence on global warming in the atmosphere, ocean, and land is I call it crisis mode, right? Unequivocal, fine, but it's crisis. It's already too late. That kind of message. Okay. Then they have projected how the global warming will be exceeded, 1.5 degrees, 2 degrees, and what can be done, right, around that. So basically short, medium, long-term targets, right? So imagine what you can do around 2030, 2040, 2050. Then you think about, okay, the continued global warming will happen. What will be the impact of the intensity on water cycles, right? On the global monsoon for us, severity of wet and dry events. So that linkage. There was a very nice report I was reading earlier this year or late last year. Earlier this year, it was all around the impact of climate change on productivity, on our living conditions. And that gave a dollar impact in terms of how it will create havoc for as simple as that, going out and doing manual labor. So the productivity will come down. People only do construction and all in countries like India and some Southeast Asian countries. There's a direct linkage in terms of negative impact on the economy. So that's the level it has gone already. And finally, as you know, there are range of other impacts, concurrent, as they say, and we took cyclones and all, we always talk about it, but that's what it is. But interesting article. I would definitely say one evening, have a read, a lot there, and I'm happy to share my piece as well. Moving on. IPCC is basically the scientists, who basically keep on looking at these modelings and they understand the global warming. Dr. Pachori got Nobel Prize from India on that. The late Dr. Pachori, I should say. So yeah. So the other message from this 6th assessment report, and we tried to cover the very latest rather than tell you what happened in 1992, right? How the whole thing came out on sustainability. But if you start looking at as simple as that, we are close to 1.5 degree rise. What it means, if we really want to reduce our emissions, global warming, how we can look into the 2030 targets for basically 50% and net zero by 2050, right? That's exactly where we're going. When it comes to what I'm saying, we are not at all close to 1.5. I'm saying we are far away. The way we are going, we are close to 4 degrees at the moment. But if you want to get closer to 1.5 degree and or limit the global warming, that's what we need to do, right? So you would say, okay, so you are trying to tell me that our emissions, everyone has to cut down. Yes. And in that, every country has come up with their targets. That 2050, UK, apart from China, everyone has a 2050 target. And there's a lot already happening on the ground. If you just go online and just see what these countries are doing, with Biden coming in, their administration has already done a lot. They're doing a lot. Europe, EU taxonomy is there. India, as you know, not only of this BRSR, but there were things that India may announce 2050 global warming, 2047. There were rumors. But if you go and see what Terry has done, there's a lot of work already happening. I mean, we are helping companies come up with their own narrative, their own scenarios, and all that, and a lot happening. Now, impacts. People ask me, what are climate change impacts, right? So heat waves, of course, rainfall, drought, storms. When you start looking at that, and what are the consequences of that, right? So when we go and do climate risk assessment, we look at the impacts, aspects, same, okay, these are the aspects, these are some of the impacts, and these are some of the consequences, right? And we have a model in place where we understand the impact on each of these areas. So that's the level we go. We use something called, I would like you to check online, something called Task Force on Climate Related Financial Disclosure. So what is TCFD? TCFD is essentially the Financial Stability Board said, okay, climate change is real. Climate change induced stranded asset can be a problem, already is a problem. People have invested in coal, people have invested in even in gas, surprise, cleaner fuel. But I was talking to a friend of mine, Iberdrola, and they were struggling to sell their gas assets, right? I was like, oh my God, gas is cleaner than coal. So that's where it's going. Some of my friends working in banking sector, very clear mandate, no funding for coal, right? So what it tells you, apart from the impacts you have, as you see on the screen, that it is a clear risk, right? Because when I put in my money, I look at the asset life. I look at the returns will come through the entire life of the asset. But if I have this stranded asset challenge, how I'm going to really look at the returns, and then the rising cost because of carbon price, and of course the societal impacts, and people like you who are at the forefront of climate change, right? So what are their choices around? I mean, are they happy to pay extra cents to get green energy, right? If they are given a choice, something to think about, right? That's where we are going. So moving on, in terms of thanks, Najib. So some of the trends, right? We thought we'll sum up some of the trends. I've covered a lot, but look, a couple of things here. You must have, in fact, most of us, we have heard about Himalayan glaciers, right? Climate-driven change is happening faster than we thought. That's the message. If you go to EY Megatrends report, you will see that Himalayan glaciers supplying water, and you know how crucial it is for our country, to 800 million people in South Asia. They're melting twice as fast as previous estimates. Okay. Our country faces a growing risk from natural disasters. 2 cyclones, right? It also witnessed the most expensive cyclone last year, Amphan, right? The estimate was around $1.5 billion US, right? And all this, and this from Munich Re, and all this can be connected, and all this is connected. So some people tell me, no, so this is not what I'm saying. You need to go into these reports, all available, and you will see. Then you start looking at Delhi, our capital, or look at the state of Delhi. Delhi alone loses close to 100 crore per day due to smog every year, right? People who are returning to India think twice before moving to Delhi. And I'm telling you, it's real, trust me. Delhi, no. Mumbai, okay. Bangalore, yes. Delhi, no. So that's real. And what's the loss in terms of per capita loss when it comes to air pollution, right? And then when you start looking at the economic loss, that can be linked to GDP, and there are estimates there on the screen. And then if you start looking at the NASA recently came up, and I posted on my LinkedIn, came up with this tool where you can really go and look at the global warming and all. Great tool around climate risks as well. So NASA is coming out and estimating the global warming, how much we have gone in terms of the way they look at it is since the late 19th century, where we are. And according to them, 16 to 20 are the warmest or were the warmest year, right? If you ask me honestly, on record. So, and then you link it to productivity and all that, and rising energy cost and all that, and failures of energy systems and all that, catastrophes. If you start looking at Paris Accord, right? So I covered COP26, which is coming, but think about the Paris Agreement. What happened in Paris Agreement, the previous COP? Companies, it forced governments to a 2050 strategy, right? A 20-20-20, what it is. Okay, we're going to reduce emission by 20%. We're going to increase renewable energy use, the share in my grid mix by 20%. And I'm going to do the low hanging thing, increase energy efficiency by 20%, right? Think about energy efficiency from this lens. In India, if you generate X, or say one unit of energy, you don't get one. The inefficiencies in the system are like you need to generate 2 to get 1. It's so bad, right? So energy efficiency will really help, and you're making 20-40% advantage there in terms of the real benefit. So think like that. Think about what India is doing around renewables. India is doing amazingly well when it comes down to renewables, and the target on 2030 is a Herculean task, but a lot happening in that space. 450 gigawatts is massive, great. Globally, companies are doing, and why it's happening? Parity, price parity. It makes business sense to go for renewables now. It's cheaper, right? So what's good for you, for the environment is good for you as well, and for the businesses as well, or it's at least becoming more affordable. And then, of course, India is a member of International Platform for Sustainable Finance. So the other aspect is money. A lot of money is needed for this transition, right? Who provides this? The financial institutions, right? And every day, a financial institution, a bank, they take a decision on screening on their investments. When they look at where they're gonna decide to invest their money or our money, it's important that they have certain benchmarks, certain you can say checklist to make it very simple, right? And it's a thorough understanding of the impacts. So India has joined, is a member of International Platform for Sustainable Finance. We have something called United Nations Principles for Responsible Investment. Large asset owners have signed on that. There are 8 principles, and when they go, the Larry Fink, for as an example, and always give this example, his letters are a marquee event for people who want to get into this space. His letter every year will talk about to the value chain stakeholders, report on ESG, make it tailored, make it specific to your sector, your company, talk about climate change and climate risk, right? And can you also think about integrated business model? An integrated business model, integrated thinking, many of you will go and start your own companies. Some of you are already doing great work in startups, I'm aware. Your generation, if I tell you, is making the biggest impact I've ever seen, right? And I'm 44, so it's not like I'm young or very old, but so impressive. But think about your business from the lens of, you have a business, integrated thinking, value creation, you need money for that business. Then you think about, not only I need money, but I also need to think about people. So that's your human capital. I also need to work relationships. I need some materials, so suppliers, the regulators, and then I have downstream my customers, and that's the relationship, right? So that's your social capital. The safety element comes in, the data privacy, cybersecurity comes in, right? That's what it is. So think about all that, and then of course human capital are your employees. So you put in these capitals into the system. You have certain enablers, for example, digitalization, so much happening, and you create value on the other side, and that's your capital on the other side, right? So that's where the world is going, and you have to balance all these capitals, and gone are the days when it's good for my pocket, bad for the environment. Won't work, because people won't allow you to do that. Either the regulation or your investors or your stakeholders or your value chain. Okay, Reserve Bank has joined something called Central Banks and Supervisors, NGFS, greening the financial system. So a lot happening at that level in terms of green finance. We are doing a lot of work with some of the green finance, some agencies. So a lot happening there. Moving on. To basically the funds you can create, and finance. So moving on, I'm gonna go. I'm going to speed up now. So guys, in terms of evolution of sustainability, so now we have covered what's happening. What you need to understand, it started in, I said 92, right? So I know the Rio Convention. So I remember it all started in 87, actually, with Brundtland report, and when I got into this field, this is what I read. The first page was about Brundtland Commission, what it was, but essentially a strategy that called for a united development and the environment, around described by the common terms, sustainable development. So that's what it was. 87 it started, right? 92, the Agenda 21 came, the Rio Convention, quite famous Rio Convention, and it talked about, again, promoting sustainable development. SDGs have come now. They came a statement of forest principles. They came a Rio Declaration. They created United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which essentially came up with drove the whole global climate emission trading schemes out of Europe, demand there, supply in India and other developing countries. Everything stemmed out of this UNFCCC, and a couple of other biodiversity and on combat desertification and all. So anyway, that gives you kind of a timeline. So if someone tells you when it started, 87, okay. 2000, they came up with Millennium Development Goals, which are now come to United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, 17 SDGs, right? That's where we have come. That gives you the overall context, of what's happening. Moving on, Najib. When it comes down to, you can say, 2021, what you need to remember is 21 was important. In 2015, COP21, a lot of targets were laid out. SDGs was on the agenda in COP26. And then finally, of course, COP26 is happening in Glasgow. Keep an eye. We are going to write blogs and all, daily blogs when COP26 happens. Read it and you will understand. The last COP, as I said, Paris Agreement, it's when you look at COP25, the whole international carbon markets and all, there's a lot happened there, and how you really look into it in terms of creating a global framework, right? Because climate change is not something which India can do on its own. It requires that global, you can say, mandate. So that's the whole. Moving on, Najib, please. In terms of SDGs, the 17 SDGs, I think I've already covered. But what you need to think about is from the lens of people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnership, right? People, planet, people, human capital, social capital, planet, natural capital, as I always say, prosperity, health and well-being, again, social side, peace, right? That's something also on the social capital, and then your partnership, governance, how you create those. So everything can be linked into that ESG. But what companies are really doing around these 5 Ps, whatever they do, they align their initiatives to these 17 goals. The alignment is real. So these are our initiatives and how we are impacting the global mandate on these UN SDGs. That's what they do. Moving on. In terms of the other thing you need to be thinking about is business, how business is responding to these, right? So take it this way. Business looks at it from the lens of either brand and reputation, or they look at it from the lens of a better way of working, because productivity, cutting down waste, increasing profits, attracting customers, right? Or they also look at meeting the needs of various value chain stakeholders. I mean, because they are crucial. So let's not just think about what's important to us. Let's think about that value chain perspective, right? My suppliers, my customers, and operational, my staff, my people, all the relationships, the governance model, all the regulatory agencies, underlying, who are making these decisions, people who are providing me capital, so that's where they are going. They are looking at more holistic decision making. And then they go with that approach. They say, we want to be the best in market differentiation, right? We want to have manage risks better. We want to be the innovation king. We want to make money out of sustainability, the value enhancing. That's where the businesses are going. Moving on, Najib. When it comes down to, if we have to sum it up, right? Something which I have already covered. I think we can move on, Najib. I think this slide I've already covered. This is kind of that universe. Now, the other thing is how a company reports on ESG. Look at this. Typical. Some examples. If you open a company's ESG report and try to understand what are their material, environment, social, governance aspects, this is what something you will see. Environment, how responsible they are around natural resource management. On social side, how they are promoting health and well-being, human rights, what they are doing, how they are looking at social well-being as well. Some of the aspects, supply chain labor standards, product approach stewardship, right? Community and all, it's a no-brainer. You operate in societies, communities, you need to have a friendly atmosphere there, right? You need to have license to operate, right? Social license to operate, as much as you have environmental license and other. And of course, decision making. Do you have a ESG committee? Who is deciding? Do they understand ESG requirements? Or you have something called Health, Safety, Environment Committee, and you say, no, ESG is covered. Somewhere, someone in marketing and compliance, legal looks at it once a year. No, won't work anymore. And then how you link it to SDGs. So for example, environment, there are 4 SDGs clearly linked. On social, we have, again, another 4. And then in governance, for example, you can look into what SDGs will link. And companies try to link so that they say, whatever we are doing is not in isolation. It's UN SDG goals we are fulfilling, and this is how we are fulfilling. So moving on, Najib. Now, on the other hand, when we look at growing importance of ESGs, external drivers, look, the first question I ask, if you talk to Silu, if you talk to Najid or any of our team members, or my seniors, my peers, people in my team, one message is clear. My first question is, hey, why you wanna get your ESG proposition right? Why? What is the need? Okay. Some of the times, today we were on a call. I give you an example, and they said, look, I don't have to do this, and Najid was on the call, but I will do it. And honestly, I kind of very respectfully, the kindest possible manner, a lot of empathy, I said, no, I'm sorry, I don't agree with you. You need to get your ESG proposition right for A, B, C, D, E, and E reasons. Can I tell you, this is what I have said today. Last year, the push investors were saying this. I didn't have to say that. Now, if I really care for a company, when I talk to them, I tell them, please get your ESG proposition right. You have to get it. Don't tell me I don't have to do this. No, you have to do this. I don't say you'll be doomed in the future. I don't say that. But trust me, you have to get your ESG proposition right. Why? 98% investors, they want companies to understand, evaluate non-financial disclosures aspects. They need 80% of them asset owners, they have to integrate ESG into their investment processes. It's important that on the UNPRI, I talked about United Nations Principles Responsible Investment, their commitment, what it means for you, because at the end, if they are the providers of capital and they have committed to something, how it will link, how it will link to you, right? Regulation, we know what's happening through SEBI. What's happening at Singapore Stock Exchange, what's happening in Australian Stock Exchange, what's happening with clean energy regulated in Australia, what's happening with climate risk requirements being mandatory in Canada, New Zealand, what's happening with the EU taxonomy, right? Where there's a lot of push around putting carbon price on imports and exports under carbon border adjustment mechanism, just as an example. Extended producer responsibility on plastic waste, polluters pay principle, pretty old concept. I've worked in this space, it's coming here, awesome. But are we ready, right? Are we ready with that? How are we gonna cope with stringent emission norms? How are we gonna, the whole world looks at coal, which is affordable, but what are we gonna do around that? Are we looking at carbon capture and storage? Are we looking at and is it too expensive? Or if it's too expensive, what I can do? Am I doing something around global value chain partnership, technology collaboration? A lot to think about. So, but one thing is for sure, investors, regulators, consumers' preference is changing, and then of course, let's not talk about stakeholder activism. I mean, if you just Google the word stakeholder activism, you will be surprised over the past 8 weeks what has happened. And I would like you to do that. Understand this concept. The concept, as I said, without dwelling too much into it, is all about the demand to get your ESG proposition right is coming from stakeholders. They want board to be responsible. They want companies to call out what they are saying, control the narrative. They want to have a clear strategy, very clear targets, what they're doing in short, medium, long term around it, from where they are coming. So three-year trend, everything needs to be very clear. And they're demanding, they're forcing companies. I'm not a Greenpeace here, but just go and see a lot happening in that space. Moving on, when it comes down to these external drivers, what is the concept of carbon neutrality? You know, and this actually I did this because Najid actually asked me to put this slide, and thanks Najid. So there's a lot of confusion at the moment, even with businesses. What is net zero? What is carbon neutrality? What is climate neutrality? And we have tried to summarize it for you. What is carbon neutrality? Imagine, I will read it, you know, so that you get it. Carbon neutrality, it refers to achieving net zero carbon dioxide emissions. So what you're doing, you're balancing carbon emission with carbon removal, or by simply stopping carbon emissions altogether. Classic, right? So that's carbon neutrality, neutralizing carbon. Okay. When you look at net zero emissions, now greenhouse gases, when you look at, means that greenhouse gas emissions from human activities, right? So human activities are causing those emissions. They should be removed from the Earth's atmosphere through various controlling measures. So you're removing that, right? So that's net zero for you. And finally, climate neutrality. The climate neutrality comes down to the state in terms of the overall climate system. So your activity have no effect on the climate system, right? And the effect of climate change is quite diverse. So we are going in that list. So I don't want you to confuse, but at least you know there are 3 different terms. Because sometimes I talk to my clients. The first project I did on carbon neutrality was for a bank called Westpac in New Zealand, make them carbon neutral. The first bank in the world to become carbon neutral, right? So I understand the concept, but when then people say, hey, we want to become carbon neutral, I saying, and someone told us to go for net zero. I say, no, they are 2 different terms, right? So for you, it's good to understand these terms, you know. Moving on, Najid. Okay, how business can achieve this? Business can achieve this by, okay, a couple of things they can do, right? So for example, reduce your emission, energy efficiency, right? You say whether we are making investments, you're responsible. You're investing in low transition, low energy, you can say carbon intensive fuel, low carbon intensive fuels. You understand how the transition is happening, so you align your growth with that. You're coming up with policies and frameworks, your own at the country level, and you align. Fine, no brainer. But then renewables, parity, power purchase agreement. I'll give you an example of L'Oreal. I was working for L'Oreal out of Melbourne, and they came to us and said, hey, can you please help us become carbon neutral? I said, yes, I'll help you put some solar panels on your warehouses where you have shared. Let's see what we can do. And then we can help you buy gold standard carbon credits. Straight away, the guy said, no, mate, we can't do that. I said, why? He said, no, my European people will think it's a greenwashing. I just don't want to do it. So what we did with Onji, doing great work, we signed a green power purchase agreement for L'Oreal. And I've written a piece on it. It's on LinkedIn as well. Feel free to look at the articles I've written. And this is a case study I converted it into. But green PPA, classic, you know, so power purchase agreement is happening. And then, of course, the value chain perspective. So scope 3 is around the value chain. I make something, I have reduced my emission, everything is climate friendly, great, but I sell that product is used somewhere which is very carbon intensive. So I need to understand that aspect as well. So have this value chain perspective, scope 3. And finally, how you can reduce your footprint in terms of the sourcing, the supply chain side. So some of these examples, right? I try to simplify, but I guess hope you understand the four aspects there, pointers there. Moving on, Najib, conscious of time. It's an hour and a half, I know, but this keeps some time for questions. Okay, A lot of technical stuff here, guys, just to give you a real time understanding of what companies are doing around science-based targets. RE100 is a global corporate leadership initiative. It has brought together influential businesses. They have committed to 100% renewable energy. That's RE100. Who are part of it, you can see on the right? Science-based target initiative, science around climate change. If you are aligned to this, it will help you meet the Paris Agreement requirement. You will limit global warming to well below 2 degrees, and you can pursue your efforts around 1.5 degrees. When we talk about 2 degrees, we talk about above pre-industrial levels. So all these concepts comes in. What's the benchmark? Pre-industrial levels, right? Carbon neutral, I've already covered. Greenhouse gases, what companies are doing around that. They're all coming up with targets, 2050, as I said. So a lot happening in India, impressive work. A lot of IT companies have already gone on that path of net zero and carbon neutrality, doing great work. And a couple of other examples. Real estate, a lot happening in real estate and infrastructure. All right, moving on. Najit, thanks. Okay. The concept of circular economy, many of you must have thought about, have thought about why things are so linear, why we can't create a circular model. Absolutely. I remember giving a paper, giving a presentation at Singapore Institute of Manufacturing Technology, SIMTech, a few years ago. And I had my counterpart, other speaker, LV, Sustainability Manager out of Europe. And I was so impressed with LV concept of circular economy, right? How they have gone systematically understanding the impact of their entire life cycle. MacArthur Foundation is something you should Google and read what they are doing. They're doing a lot of work around circular economy, coming up with thought pieces, coming up with frameworks and standards. But the concept is simple. Hey, why have a linear model when we can make it circular, right? So a lot happening in the tire manufacturing, a lot happening in cement, a lot of examples, right? We can take. But the concept is eco-design, production, distribution, consumption and stock, how you recycle, how you look at material efficiency, reuse, repair, distribute, refurbish, and remanufacture. I call it the 5 R's, but the concept you need to understand, these 5 R's and all are there anyway on the screen. Moving on, Najib. Okay. Again, the same concept, so corporate role, what corporates can do around the circular economy. So for example, in India, they came up with vehicle scrapping policy, right? It's more of a cradle to cradle utilization of material. That's one example. On the human resource utilization, it's more of a holistic utilization. Do you need specialized workforce or a shared workforce, right? The collaborative environment in industry, the value chain partnership. And finally, then it comes down to the consistency, how you're really hedging, how you're really managing your financial consistency in terms of the raw material and how you're creating partnerships. A lot of examples. So I can deep dive into this, but I won't, maybe too much, but please understand the concept. It revolves around money, revolves around collaboration, industry, plus around your internal management, around how you're utilizing the resources and how you are looking at your human capital. That's what I would like you to, as a takeaway from this slide. And then there's a lot happening in the carbon side as well. This concept of strategy of reduce, reuse, recycle, removal of 5 R's or 4 R's. 4 R's are relevant for greenhouse gas emissions, where companies are coming and they're looking into closing the loop in carbon capture and storage. Is gaining momentum in decarbonization. A lot of work being done. I remember the Middle East. A lot of work is happening around that concept. The Royal in Abu Dhabi from memory, yeah. So they're doing a lot of work in this space. So moving on, Najib. Okay, some examples, guys, on circular economy. I would like you to, there are a lot of examples. I took what were my favorites, right, or where I've worked before. Some of them were my clients. Essex doing great work, right? The whole concept of circularity integration from sourcing to disposal, very impressive. For H&M, the supply chain efficiency they have looked at, and they are looking at the whole approach around coming up a responsive, just-in-time production system, right? Unilever, the leaders, the pioneers, they're doing so much work around 3 R's on plastic across value chain. And finally, Nestle. Nestle has partnered with Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which I said, and cutting edge work done on plastics economy initiative. and real targets, guys, real targets. They're achieving those targets, and you can see what they have done, how they've achieved the target, and what's the next target. It's a journey, right? It's not something which you can just do overnight. Moving on. In terms of when you look at yeah, so to wrap up, okay, good. I thought it would take around an hour, and that's good. Look, the message from this comes down to awareness, strategy, and management of ESG issues, right? Is there, but is no longer enough to meet stakeholder requirements. That's my message. There's urgent call for increased transparency and accountability in all spheres, right? That's what's happening. The environment at the moment is uncertain, right? If you start looking at ESG risk, it can impact business profitability, even survival, right? Mainstream investors, they want to know what material organizations are identifying, managing ESG risk, and are they adequately, effectively disclosing it in terms of the organization risk filings. The paradigm is changing, right? If you start looking at the paradigms of key stakeholders, their expectation for organizations to align their interventions with leading ESG performance standards. So no longer, so sometimes we work with company in a year, next year they come, hey, the bar has only gone up. We have to integrate ESG analytics. Can you come and do some analytics? Can you complete the picture around our value creation for our investors and other stakeholders, right? And to cater to this need, they need to come up with this in-depth, meaningful, decision-worthy disclosures. I call it value-led reporting. You need to think like this, right? There are three ways you can go about helping a company. You go and create a very nice strategy at the group level. Then you help them embed the key aspects at entity level. And then that automatically, ideally, should help in a meaningful disclosure. The disclosure is just an outcome. One way of doing it, yes, we are doing that. Second way of doing it, hey, bottom-up approach, right? We are having continuous dialogue with our stakeholders, internal, external. There has been a gradual and parallel evolution in the reporting landscape. We are aware. I'm like, okay. Then the clients would say, the global landscape is evolving. There's increased granularity in data. Metrics are enhanced. Performance management is real time. Can you help us create these monitoring and evaluation? Can we really? How about we identify these ESG impacts both in dollars and both in metrics, both quantitative and qualitative? Because I want to ensure that every penny I invest in social impact, I just don't stop at the outcomes, right? So what I'm trying to say, so much social work we do, right? Now, if I just say the outcome was A, B, C, but I don't stop at outcome, I do assessment around impact, real impacts in dollars. That's where the companies are going, right? So look, that's what it is. And I can go on and on. There's so much in this space. But what I would suggest, I've tried to cover a lot in the last 1 hour. I want to give you some time for the question and answers. But yeah, look, open for any question, open to deep dive into any one of them or anything which I haven't covered. It's such a vast area. Over to you, Anvi. Thanks so much. And thanks, Najib, for your help. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. We'll now be moving on to the Q&A session. Jyotika will be handling that.
Hi, Jyotika. You're on mute.
Yeah, we just give it up.
Yeah, sorry about that. Thank you so much, sir. This was an extremely insightful session. We would like you to go on and on about this as well. It was really interesting to know your viewpoint and all of this. So we have a few questions from the audience. We've just picked a couple. Firstly, is it possible for big corporations and industries to be 100% sustainable? If so, how? I'm sorry, sir, you're on mute.
Sorry, so I did what you were doing, Jyotika. So perfect. Look, guys, great question, and I'm expecting nothing less. Yeah, companies can, but it all depends upon what they mean by 100% sustainable. As long as they define what that is, yes, they can. But defining that is interesting because the bar changes. So to answer this question, companies should be very realistic in terms of what they are trying to achieve. What is their strategy? What is their goal, right? And then go on that path. It's not an overnight thing. It takes time. So that's what. So sustainability means, so let's take an example. I want to become carbon neutral. I want to ensure that all my suppliers use renewable energy. So if you go to Porsche, they came up recently saying they're going to ensure that all their suppliers use clean energy, renewable energy, right? Yeah, that's their target. They're going to work on it, can be achieved. But you need to define what that sustainability is. Otherwise, it's a wishy-washy word. I want to be sustainable. For me, sustainability can also be mental health and well-being, right? And how I can really be, how can I really be just say I'm 100% sustainable? It's those are some of the elements. The softer side of sustainability, the hard metrics and targets, the real goals. Some of it is the intangible. In fact, the concept is intangible, but how you convert that. So yeah, so that's what it is, Jyotika. Yeah.
Absolutely understood, sir. Thank you. The second question being, electric vehicles that run on lithium-ion batteries, they're manufactured with damage to the environment, of course. So are we really doing justice when we switch to that, when we switch to EVs?
Look, a lot of work has been done in that space. And let me tell you, people have done life cycle assessment based on current understanding, right? So just Google and you will read Elon Musk interview and you can clearly see, if you compare a life cycle of, you can say, combustible engine, and if you look at any CI engine, and if you look at EV, it's proven that EV is still better. It's already proven. I would like to just bury the whole drama because people say, no, EVs are bad. Yeah, they are bad because you don't get it. You don't understand. Even I don't. The science is coming around the whole life cycle assessment on every single thing. When it comes down to what goes in and what you're going to do at the end of it, what's the life cycle, and the degradation. My problem is little different. My problem is performance parity. My problem is not saying EVs are bad. No, EVs are not bad. Operationally, EVs are much better. We all know that. But my problem comes down to performance management. So think about, to answer your question, you will get a lot of these reports around life cycle of batteries and waste management. A lot of companies are getting into coming up with safe disposal and recycling and all what they can. So those things will come, right? And I think the market will take care of that. My problem is when I say I buy an EV in India, but I'm using the energy from the grid, which is predominantly coal, right? So what am I doing? I mean, it's great to say I drive EV. Operationally, maybe cheaper, but am I really doing any good for the environment? So those kind of questions I ask. The second question I'll ask: hey, I look at any gasoline-fired engine, and then I look at EV. How the performance will compare after 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 6 years of the two. And the batteries you're talking about, they're changing the electrolytes, so much happening in that space, solid and all, so much happening. There are a lot of companies who are doing, but I talk about those things. So those challenges remain. But look, EVs in New Zealand makes perfect sense, right? 70% electricity is coming from the grid, a no-brainer, right? So all those aspects, yeah.
Absolutely, sir.
Thanks.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the third question being, is concentration or investment in sustainability initiatives leading to useful changes or more unprecedented impacts or costs?
No, great question. Look, okay, let me try to answer this question in a different way. When we talk about sustainability, I would like you to remember, at the end, it's about balancing financial sustainability. If I'm out of business, what impact that will have on the human capital? Think about that. Sustainability is a complex area. It's not just about putting all my money to buy expensive, clean energy. That won't be smart. So how you balance your business needs with the whole price parity in renewables, new energy coming up, how you stay on top of it, how you really look at what investors are demanding, what is your narrative, and you create, you turn this opportunity and risk management process around ESG into a business opportunity. That's the concept. The concept is definitely not about planting 200 trees, right? It's about how you make, it's a business case for sustainability. That's what it is. You need to be in business. You need to balance everything. I give you an example, electricity, there's something called trilemma of, you can say, the trilemma is all about, think about, x-axis is all about clean energy, procuring clean energy. Y-axis is all about procuring affordable energy, right? And then reliable energy. So reliable, affordable, and clean. How you balance the trilemma, right? And that's the challenge. You can go and get clean energy, but is it expensive? Okay, in some countries, yes, some countries not, and now maybe not, but reliability is an issue, right? So the challenge will remain, things are evolving. So the businesses are smart enough to take that decision by balancing the financial sustainability with social and environment sustainability. Yeah.
Absolutely. And let's hope that, businesses really get to a point where they can, reach that balance.
Yeah.
The fourth question, one that's extremely popular among students right now, especially after hearing your talk, is there any specific degree that one should pursue to get into this particular industry?
Yeah. No, absolutely. No, great question. So look, it's last when I was recruiting people, not here, in my previous roles, I told this to Najid as well the other day. I used to tell the team saying, hey, if someone has an engineering and accounting degree, I would prefer that person, right? Engineering and accounting. And we're like, what? Okay. And that's pretty common overseas, right? And why? Because a lot of work we were doing was pushed by regulation around assurance. To do that work, you need to have a technical understanding, right? So my advice would be totally opposite to what I used to say, because my thinking is now changed. At that time, it was the kind of work was mostly in hard to abate sectors, was more into energy and resources sector. But now what's coming, the kind of degrees you can get into, first you need to decide what you want to go into. You want to get into environment, social governance side of things, right? You want to get into the climate change, energy and climate change. You want to get into safety, people safety, process safety, the softer side of safety, culture change, system safety. So when you look at this field, please look at it from the lens of sustainability. In sustainability, think about environmental, social. In climate change, you think about what companies can do. Think about climate risks. There are a lot of degrees on climate risks at the moment. There are a lot of courses. So Cambridge is offering a lot of courses. But now they're the MBAs in sustainability, right? IIMS Lucknow offers an MBA. We recruited, all my 3 managers at the moment in my team who are reporting to me in Mumbai are IIMS Lucknow passed out MBA in sustainability. I have a similar degree from overseas. How you do 1 year MBA and then you do 6 more months of and out of 1 year you're looking at business, environmental issues, sustainability issues, rather than just the business issues, right? That degree. So how you apply the same concept, same skill set in terms of business, but you need to understand those issues. So those degrees are there. In bachelor's, look, you can go on any path and then come into this field. You become an engineer, you do a science degree, you do psychology, you will be doing a lot of work on mental health and well-being, you will be doing investigations. So you can take any route. If you're interested in this space, trust me, a finance background helps. For example, at the moment, the banking sector is struggling to get people who can do climate risk assessments, right? They're struggling to get good people who understand that aspect. So how you really go and understand the money, understand the risk, understand modeling, understand scenario analysis, understand the assets, how companies go about investments. So yeah, so that's a lot of courses available now as compared to when I was looking at a lot of courses.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. That's very helpful, especially your last bit, because now we kind of have an idea of what exactly we'd have to do to get into this industry. So that is all for the questions. I'm handing it back to Anvi. This has been very helpful. Thank you.
No problem, Jyoti. Thank you.
Thank you, Jyotika. Now we'll be having the vote of thanks. Ashna, please take it over.
Yeah, hello everyone. Before we end the event, Najit sir, could you please stop sharing your screen? And if the participants could turn their cameras on for a quick group photo, that would be nice.
Najit, if you can just stop sharing the screen, please. Thanks, and thanks for your help. Yeah.
All right, I think everyone has turned on their camera. Smile at 3, 2, 1. Another one. 3, 2, 1. Thank you so much.
No, thanks to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Anvi. Thank you everyone for being a part of this enriching session. We would like to take this opportunity to extend our gratitude to Mr. Shailesh Tyagi from EY India for not only giving us a glimpse into corporate sustainability, but also helping us to understand these topics which are crucial to the industry. We would also like to thank Silu and Najit for being present with us today. We would like to mention the EY team and Rajashri, Shreya, Mahima, Pallavi, Pratiksha for their support to carry out the session. I'm really sorry if I missed out on anyone's names. We would also like to thank our principal, Dr. Rajendra Shinde sir, Dr. Subhaiba Pirani ma'am, and our professor in charge, Sangeeta Chavan ma'am. And a big thank you to the collaboration of Commercium and XEC, without which this session wouldn't have been possible. Last but not the least, we would like to thank our participants for being such an encouraging and supportive audience. We really hope that everyone enjoyed the session. Before leaving the meeting, we would like you all to fill the feedback form which has been shared in the chat box, and it will help us in the future to plan many such enriching sessions for you guys. The results to the Where to Care a Sustainable Entrepreneur Case Study competition will be announced on our Instagram pages. The links are in the chat box at 7 p.m. today. So do follow us on Instagram and turn your post notifications on to be notified. And thank you once again, everyone, for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you again in our upcoming events. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashna, and thanks everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thanks, guys.